Hey folks, Greasy Spoon here. What was it? This past Monday, uh, Surly Smurf and Mad Mage and myself, the Greasy Spoon, we sat down with my town's local history expert, Lou Bernard, and we kind of went blind into it, and we didn't know what we were doing, but it turned out awesome. Um, it was very informative. I learned a lot about where I live. Um, I hope you guys enjoy this because my town's kind of sort of famous, whatever, I guess. But, look into it yourselves. And if we're planning on having him back down the road, possibly around Halloween, we can talk about some haunted shit. But I hope you enjoy this. We call this The Library.
All right, welcome to a special edition of the Punk Rock Geek. Then we got Mr. Lou Bernard here. He knows quite a bit about Lock Haven, Pennsylvania, and Clinton County, Pennsylvania, and this is where I'm from. I grew up here, and I just wanted to teach everybody a little bit about where I'm from. And so, Lou, have at it, sir.
Oh wow, that was quick.
We let our guests we let our guests run the show.
Yep. Right. Well, hey, feel free to jump in with questions anytime.
Absolutely.
I'll give, or if there's anything special you want to hear about, otherwise I can give you some of the stock speech. Yep. Clinton County and Lock Haven were both founded by the same guy, Jeremiah Church. Okay. And you see, there's two existing pictures of Jerry Church. And you look at him and you would think he was just this stern sort of, the very strict kind of town founder. You know how we picture everybody in the old days as unsmiling. Except Jerry just got this little hint of a smile in his pictures. Jerry Church was not your typical stern, strict type of guy from the past. Most people are not aware that Lock Haven and Clinton County both were founded by a guy who was thrown out of school at age 13 for trying to kiss the teacher. He admitted in his journal, which we have for sale at the library where I work, by the way. Nice. We have copies available for $1.75. He admitted in his journal that did not really work out the way he thought it would. So, he traveled around the country trying different things to make himself a living. He referred to himself as an adventurer, which fit as much as anything else did. Yep. He had some normal type of jobs. He was, a farmer, a rancher. He said that hard work didn't agree with him. It hurt his feelings. His exact words.
And after my own heart.
He had a few other different jobs. Mm-hmm. He was a curator in a traveling wax museum for a while. Wow. He was a gold miner for a while. His total profit on that one, 37.5 cents. Which even in the 1820s wasn't that much, Right. But he did carry a nugget of gold around in his pocket for years to prove that he'd been once a gold digger. Nice. Came to this area in the fall of 1833 to visit his brother Willard, who was living here in a local hotel at the time. And Jerry just fell in love with the place. He'd grown up on a farm along a river, and we're right along the Susquehanna here. Mm-hmm. Every community Jerry Church ever tried to create was by a river. If there was a place prone to flooding, Jerry Church wanted in. So he also, after his adventure in Lock Haven, he went west. He created Carlisle, Iowa, which still exists. And you know, I'm actually friends with the big historian out there, Melody Kirk. She's awesome, and she and I kind of trade information a lot.
Oh, yeah?
He also created Franklin, Kansas, which was so dependent on the slave trade that after the Civil War, its economy just collapsed. Franklin no longer exists.
Wow.
But Jerry came out here in the fall of 1833 and just loved the look of the area. Now, since you guys are kind of allowing me to go off in whatever direction I want here, I'm going to deviate just a little bit and say Jerry Church just barely missed the Irish-German Canal riot. And I bring this up because it's both literally and figuratively a riot. I mean, this is a hysterical story. The canals were in process. They were being built in like the summer, fall of 1833. At the time Jerry arrived, it was August of 1833, just before the founding of Lock Haven, when the Irish and the Germans were the big ethnic groups at the time. The Irish were actually building the canals while the Germans were shipping in the materials. And there was a lot of friction between the two. You know, there's a lot of conflict there. They did not mesh well. Both food and paychecks were late or not at all. There were, you know, a lot of these guys doing their work in the hot sun and going hungry. The one and only guy in management who was really consistently doing his job well was called the jigger boss. He was in charge of pouring the jiggers to keep everyone happy. A plan that really only works in the short term. So, in August of 1833, two of the Irish guys snuck into a nearby orchard, the orchard of Mrs. Hunt, to steal some apples. And they were chased out with a shotgun by Mrs. Hunt's son. And it all would have ended there if it weren't for the Germans, who kept taunting them about it. And the Irish guys then got fed up and, probably with the help of some of the whiskey, decided that the Germans had probably put Mrs. Hunt's son up to chasing them out with the shotgun. So finally, one day, fists were thrown, and it escalated into a full-blown riot. Because we're talking about two ethnic groups traditionally known for their calm, laid-back approach to it. So anyway, you know, they started to fight, and then they tore down each other's shanties that they lived in, and I mean, just broke a lot of stuff and everything. So at the time this happened, this was part of Lycoming County. So word had to go to Williamsport to send the militia to kind of calm things down. And it was kind of like Whisper Down. You remember Whisper Down the Alley when you were a kid?
Yeah.
Where one kid starts a whisper, but by the time it reaches its destination, it's nothing like the. Okay, well, in reality, there was just like a broken arm and a lot of bruised feelings. However, by the time word got to Williamsport, they were hearing stories of 500 dead all up and down the Susquehanna. So they sent the militia out to come down here. They made a bunch of arrests. The remaining Irish and Germans who escaped arrest ran off into the mountains above Castania, present-day Castania, where they discovered that as long as they were fugitives from the law, they could get along pretty well. So that was the Irish-German Canal riot. I love telling that story. So Jerry Church decided to found Lock Haven, which was an interesting choice as he did not really have any money. I've been asked, you know, how did Jerry Church make all his money? Well, really he didn't. More than one of his business ventures went under because he couldn't resist offering unlimited credit to any pretty face that wandered in. A lot of the time he would be selling farm equipment or something, and the farmers learned to have their wives and daughters ask for credit. because Jerry would agree to that. He never really outgrew, his love of women. So
God bless him.
anyway, Jerry and his brother decided to get an investor. They went to Williamsport. They talked to somebody who, decided to invest, and then he backed out at like the last possible minute. The plan was to buy 200 acres of land from Dr. John Henderson, who owned like all of the land in the area at the time. Henderson was a retired Revolutionary War doctor. So when the investor backed out, Jerry ran back to Williamsport to see if he could find another one. And Jerry Church was a real charming guy. He was a good guy. Everybody liked him. He was popular. So he talked to a few people and he came up with a replacement investor. Now, this guy was anonymous. We know from Jerry's journal that he was an attorney from Williamsport, but, Jerry never recorded his actual name. Like almost 200 years later, I now believe I know who this guy is. Big secrets, national treasure stuff going on. Now this is interesting. Looking at the old maps of Lock Haven from this day. Okay, there's a map that Jerry himself drew, and it's got all the streets and alleys at the time. Now it wasn't the huge, big area that we now know Lock Haven to be. It was about a dozen square blocks down around the courthouse and present-day Robb Elementary School.
Okay.
But the alleys and streets, Church Street in Lock Haven is not named because there was a church on it. It was named after Jerry Church.
Right.
There's Henderson Street after John Henderson.
Yeah.
There is Sarah's Alley. I'll get to Sarah's Alley in a minute. You guys are going to enjoy this one. The alleys to either side of Church Street are Willard's Alley and Mary's Alley after Jerry's brother Willard and Willard's wife Mary. And I noticed years ago that there's a Jordan's Alley. It's the long one that runs like behind the courthouse, all the way between Water and Main across town.
Yeah.
Could not find out who Jordan's Alley was named after. Oh, hey kiddo.
Oh.
My son.
Hey buddy.
Hey. Ghostbusters, love it.
Yes.
What was that?
He's wearing a Ghostbusters shirt. I love that.
Yes. He hunts ghosts with me. We go looking for ghosts together a lot of the time. Yeah, we do paranormal stuff, look for Bigfoot.
Cool. That's cool.
So Jordan's Alley, I noticed that there didn't seem to be any real explanation for Jordan's Alley. I can tell you who just about every other street is named for.
Right.
And I realized we had this anonymous investor. So we had a name without a guy and a guy without a name. And, could there be the same thing? So I called up Scott Sager, who is he's with the Lycoming Historical Society, big historian over across the border. And he's getting used to these weird questions from me. And I said, Scott, was there somebody who in 1833 was an attorney, could have ponied up $20,000 for a loan named Jordan? And he just like that, he said, Judge Alexander Jordan.
Oh, wow.
Pretty sure that's the anonymous investor.
Wow.
So Jerry went back and, bought the land. November 4th, 1833, held a public auction where he sold off 200 acres of land. The first plot went to Frank Smith. Smith owned the property that is now across from the courthouse at the corner of Water and J, where Lindsay Place now stands.
Yeah.
Okay, he built a hotel there. Smith was also, and I realize I'm going off deviating in a bunch of directions here. Trust me, it's worth it.
Yeah, you have my interest.
Well, Smith was a hotel owner and a founding member of the Thespian Society. Now, this was a group of, my son's joining us.
Oh,
right.
No worries. We're all dads.
Welcome.
Yep.
You're on the show, buddy.
Basketball, okay. He's just learning basketball, and he's really having a good time with it.
Awesome.
All right.
Awesome.
You made 8 hoops. Way to go. My son made 8 hoops, 5 more than yesterday.
Right
Well
on.
done.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So,
Oh, yeah.
I can't make any.
oh, he said he was kidding. He actually just made 3 today. That's
No.
still pretty good, though.
That's okay.
It's not bad. More than I can make.
So, yeah, me too.
Basketball's hard.
So, anyway, where was I? Oh, Frank Smith. Okay, Smith was a founding member of the Thespian Society. Okay, the Thespian Society were a group of local hotel owners and kind of wannabe actors. And they would get together and practice plays, and once a month, they would put on a different play as dinner theater in these hotels. So it was a really good, beneficial thing for everybody involved. The local citizens got some entertainment.
Yep.
You know, they got to go see a play. The hotel owners got to live out their dreams of being actors, and they got to make a little bit of money. You know, it worked out for everybody. So, you know, that was really the only Lock Haven entertainment that they had in the early days was the Thespian Society. So, you know, that was, you know, Frank Smith who bought the first plot. And I promised I was going to tell you guys about Sarah's Alley, and that's worth it too. Sarah's Alley is the little one that runs beside the courthouse, kind of catty corner to Jordan's Alley.
Okay.
That was probably named after Sarah Spear. Sarah was the only single marriageable female in the early days of Lock Haven. From about 1833 to 1840, she was it, the entire dating pool.
Ow.
Everyone else was too young or too old or too married.
Poor girl.
Sarah, so,
Oh.
oh, so that was, you know, that was your social life. If you wanted a date, you invited Sarah Spear to the Thespian Society. So, you know, he was selling off the lots, and I said the first plot of land went to Smith. The biggest and most expensive, 120 acres, and let's see, $9,000 at the time, went to James Jeffries, a retired pirate from Chester County. Now, yeah, I always expect to get hate mail from his ancestors. He was a privateer, technically, which is basically a government licensed pirate.
Yeah.
You know, and let's be real, nobody ever made a really cool movie called Privateers of the Caribbean.
No.
James Jeffries grew up in Chester County. He was working his dad's farm when he was a young man, like 17, 18, knew he wanted a career. He knew it was not going to involve plowing. So he was doing this one day when a ship pulled up off the Delaware River. The captain got off, said, "Can I get any hands here?" Jeffries immediately threw down his plow and said, "I'll go," and got on the ship. And that was how he started a life of regulated piracy. Was successful enough, he was able to buy his own ship called the Neptune, and he had a lot of adventures. He actually had a parrot. It's mentioned in the family history. We have a copy of that at the library too.
Yeah, that is awesome.
You know, so yeah, he had a lot of adventures. You know, one of his sons, Taylor, as a teenager, stowed away on the ship to go join Dad at sea. So he was retired by the time that Jerry Church was founding Lock Haven. Now, James Jeffries had relatives in the area. Mrs. Hunt of the Apple Orchard was his mother-in-law.
Okay.
All right. So you know, Jeffries had heard that this new community was being founded, so he packed up his wife and kids, moved out here, built a house that still stands. It's right at the corner of Henderson and East Bald Eagle Streets. It's 400 East Bald Eagle.
Yeah.
That was James Jeffries' house, the home of a retired pirate.
Wow.
His son grew up to become the mayor, by the way. So, you know, the mayor of Lock Haven was once the son of a pirate, which I think is really cool.
That is cool.
So, yeah,
That's
don't anybody tell
amazing.
me this isn't a great place to live. We've had some interesting mayors, too. But anyway, so immediately after having founded the town of Lock Haven, no. My son's adding commentary here.
Oh.
Um,
Mystery Science
but
Theater,
anyway,
yes.
Jerry Church decided he wanted to found a county around his. He wanted Lock Haven to be the county seat of a brand new county. His plan: take part of Lycoming, part of Center, combine them to make a new county to be called Eagle County. So he went to the state legislature twice a year during the winter and summer sessions for 6 straight years, pitching this idea, and they laughed him off every time. They just basically ignored him, you know.
Yeah.
So finally, he talked to his friend John Moorhead. Now, Moorhead is an interesting. We still have guys like this around. John Moorhead was one of those guys that keeps like running for office, but can't really get the votes. You see him campaigning every time, but he never actually gets elected. We still.
Ralph Nader.
You guys, I'm sure everybody just got somebody local in mind there, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So, but Clinton County wouldn't have been founded without him. Jerry went and they changed the name of the county. Jerry wanted it to be Eagle County, but instead he let Moorhead do most of the talking, and then they said, hey, let's take some of Center, some of Lycoming, put it together, and make a new county called Clinton County after New York Governor DeWitt Clinton. And the state legislature loved that. They voted it through unanimously without ever realizing that it was the same property they'd been voting against for 6 years. So, there was then immediately debating about where the county seat was going to be. You need to have a county seat.
Mhm.
Jerry wanted Lock Haven. His reason: he wanted the courthouse built next to his own home, so that he could go next door and sue his neighbors anytime he wanted. And this is not me paraphrasing. This is literally the way he said it in his journal. Though he later admitted that he changed his mind on that, and it was better to stay out of court. So John Moorhead, him again, he wanted Dunstown as the county seat because it was the oldest community in the county.
Okay.
Founded 1792. However, Jerry was more charming, and more likable. So the county commissioners went with Lock Haven instead of Dunstown. Now, any county seat needs a courthouse. Lock Haven has had either 2 or 4, depending on what your interpretation is. Well, first, there was the Barker's Tavern Courthouse. This was on Water Street in a local tavern. The county commissioners went and rented out most of the building. So if you entered Barker's Tavern, owned by William Barker, who, by the way, his son grew up to become the mayor too. So you would go in, and on one side there was still the bar and grill. You'd go in, and you'd still have a beer. On the other side, down the hall on the other side, there was the courtroom, making it real easy to bust a UI.
Yeah.
Upstairs, there were several rooms that all of which were rented out to be the offices of the register recorder, clerk of courts, the Brythonetary, and it might sound crowded, but in those days, this was all done by one guy, Philip Krebs. Krebs was pretty much the entire county government.
Wow.
So we're talking about a time when for like $1, you could get the entire county government drunk downstairs. Now, you'll notice I make no mention of a sheriff's office here.
Yeah.
Okay, that's because the sheriff, John Miller from Dunstown, refused to have an office. He worked out of his hat. He had this big 10-gallon hat he wore around. He would swing by Krebs's office every now and again, pick up the outstanding warrants, tuck them in his hat, and off he'd go. He refused to have any kind of an office. And sometimes he'd come back with the warrant served, and sometimes he wouldn't. Miller served 1 term as county sheriff. He lost the election next time around, maybe the next guy had a bigger hat. The Barker's Tavern Courthouse was the first one. John Moorhead built the second courthouse right on the corner at Main Street, very near our present-day courthouse.
Okay.
Moorhead built one and offered it free to the county commissioners. He basically said, hey, free courthouse, guys, what do you think? And typically for Moorhead's life, the county commissioners said, oh, yeah, thanks, John, but no, we're going to build a new one on land that Jerry Church donated over here. And then they hired Moorhead to design and build the next one. That was over on land where Robb Elementary School now stands.
Okay.
Okay, and as a matter of fact, if you
Where
go
the old
past
jail
the-
is.
Yes, that's why the placement of the jail, which by the way didn't come along till later.
Yeah.
They used to just lock the guys up in the basement of the courthouse, but
Oh,
the
wow.
old jail was built in 1852. So there
Okay.
was like this 14-year gap where they had the courthouse but no jail to speak of.
Right. Now
So-
it's apartments.
Now it's though I do have to say there's 2 apartments in there, but the rest of it, nobody has bothered to make it look like not a jail. It's
That's
still
interesting.
very, they use it for storage and it's still jail-like in there. You can see the bars, you can see the, and if you walk around, and I've done investigations in there.
Mhm.
If you walk around in there, I mean, you can tell which one was the suicide watch cell.
Wow.
It's fascinating. So
Wow.
anyway, if you look at Robb Elementary School, there's a bell in the front.
Right.
That bell has been there. It's the old bell from the courthouse. It's been on that property since
Okay.
1840.
Wow.
And it
Wow.
was designed and built by John Wilbanks, who had a hand in preserving the Liberty Bell back then.
Wow.
So yeah, it says his name right on the front.
That's crazy.
So,
Okay.
Anyway, that
Bell's
was
older
what
than
was
my
known
country.
as the Jerry Church.
Right.
And that lasted until the 1860s, at which point it was in bad repair, and they built the 4th and final courthouse where it stands now at the corner of Water and J Street.
Yeah.
So
That's
Jerry Church didn't stick around, he stayed here about 12 years.
okay.
During that time, he had a daughter out of wedlock. Young Margaret Church. Interestingly, and this was another little mystery I dug into and maybe solved. It's always been a bit of a mystery who was the mother of Margaret Church. Okay, and why didn't Jerry marry her? And there are people who will tell you, oh, he skipped town, he didn't want to commit, and so on. Turns out that is not true. In fact, I think he intended to marry her.
Okay.
With some old documentation from a descendant of Jerry's a few years ago, she sent me some of the old papers, and it turns out that Margaret's mother was most probably Maria Mann, the daughter of a local hotel owner. What's the matter, kiddo? What's scaring you? No, there's nothing scary here, buddy. It's just history stuff. Oh, buddy. There's nothing scary here, buddy. Okay. No, Margaret's mother was Maria Mann, daughter of the local hotel owner, Alexander Mann.
Okay.
And turns out she died in childbirth. So Jerry, by all accounts, was a good dad to Margaret.
Mhm.
He provided for her. He raised her, did real well. So, and there is a bit at the end of his journal where he gets a little bit sad and thoughtful, talks about not knowing what comes in the next life. And I really think that's him kind of grieving for his lost love. I think for once in his life, Jerry was ready to settle down, and then it all fell through on him.
Huh.
I was reading a little bit of your work, Lou, and I may have mixed up the counties here. But was it in Lock Haven that the courthouse was actually stolen?
No, that was Forest County.
Oh, right. Okay.
Oh,
I
you
mixed
read
it
that
up.
one? Yes.
Yes.
That was just published by the Pennsylvania Wilds. I do some writing for them too. And yeah, that was Forest County, where there was dispute over where was going to be the county seat. So a bunch of people who wanted one town snuck in the dead of night, picked up all the courthouse documents, papers, everything, loaded them into a wagon, and took them to the new place. Yeah. I just recently published that one. I was rather happy with that, actually. I'm glad you saw it.
That was really good. I mixed up the names. It was a little earlier today, and I had a newborn issue.
Understandable. But yeah, no, a few years ago, the Pennsylvania Wilds asked me if I do some writing for them. Pennsylvania Wilds is a 13-county area of PA that's like designed for tourist promotion, bringing people to the forests and trails out here. And I love writing for them because up until then, I'd been pretty much just concentrating on Clinton County. And this turns me loose writing about a whole new area that, I wouldn't have gotten to otherwise.
Yeah, that's really cool.
That's awesome.
That's fantastic.
So yeah, I'm very happy with my work there.
So my question, like I've lived here most of my life, and I've never known, like, where did the name Lock Haven come from?
The canal locks. I should have said that, actually. Yeah, Jerry wanted this area to be a haven along the Susquehanna with the canal locks.
Okay. Then I never knew that.
A lot of people don't. They just don't really question it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've even looked into the history of the town, and it's like it just never clicked with me for some reason. I don't understand.
Yeah. No, that's
But that
where
makes a lot of sense because of the logging and stuff that went on.
Yep. That was a big, logging, shipping, the canals provided for a lot of our industry.
And that, I mean, that ties into the choice to call it Clinton, doesn't it? Wasn't he a big supporter of the Erie Canal?
Yes. Governor DeWitt Clinton of New York was a huge supporter of the Erie and canals in general.
Right.
That's correct. Yeah. So it was kind of more fitting that way.
Sure. And to kind of go off I guess it may be Lock Haven, I don't know, but is there a piece of local Pennsylvania or Clinton County history that everybody's just digging around, but they just can't find the answer? Some historical mystery?
Yeah, there's a bunch of them.
That's awesome.
I only talk like I've solved it all. There's a lot of this stuff. I just had a piece recently in the Lock Haven Express. Actually, this is one I probably do know the answer to now. But I recently wrote about some cairns. They're very organized, very beautiful looking stacks of rock that exist up on Colebrook Township. And there's been a lot of debate over the years about where these things come from. Now these were deliberately crafted, very deliberately built, and they meant something to somebody. I've always been a fan of the idea that if they're Native American. Yes, Paul?
When you're done, can you go upstairs with me and give me pajamas?
Yes. So, but now I can pretty close to prove they're Native American. I went up there recently, and I realized that these things are surrounded by bent trees. These trees that are bent and grown in these unnatural formations.
Wow.
They look almost like, a letter N or a very squared off letter U growing out of the ground. And the Native Americans used to do that as a way of like signaling trails or boundary markers. If you get online and you Google Native American bent trees,
Okay.
You will find trees that look just like these ones in Colebrook Township. Another interesting mystery is Reverend Joseph Nesbitt. Okay, this is a good one. Nesbitt, hold on. Sorry, didn't want the dog eating Lego.
Bad news bears.
We know one and only house in Lock Haven that was on the Underground Railroad that we can prove. Maria Molson's house at 19 East Water Street, we can prove that one was on the Underground Railroad.
Huh.
Oh, that's awesome.
However, there are hints that a local reverend, Joseph Nesbitt of Great Island Presbyterian Church, he may have been on. And this one I'm still working on. Nesbitt, like I said, local reverend, we have a copy of his journal down at the library. Now, part of this is written in this shorthand nobody's ever deciphered. The rest of it, he talks a lot. He like agonizes about the difference between man's law and God's law. You know, talking about what's right and what's legal. So he sounds like he was somebody who was helping out with the Underground Railroad. You know, we can't prove it though. And I will say, I read through this a few years ago and I noticed that he talks about going places, and I went to this here town and I brought back 10 books. And, you know, and he talks about how many books he brought back. And this interests me because if you put books in quotes, he kind of, it sounds like the sort of secret code that would have been used to talk about how many slaves he had smuggled back through to free, you know? So that I can't prove he was on the Underground Railroad, but I suspect. Now, I'll tell you, if you're interested in mysteries, I'll tell you this. You'd think this is pretty basic. We are not 100% sure how many mayors have been in Lock Haven and who they've been.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we used to think we knew.
So basically what you're telling me is it's super easy to become mayor.
Well, not that I know of, but getting history to remember you is another thing. Okay, we used to have a list of mayors. It was published in the Sesquicentennial book, printed up when Lock Haven turned 150 back in 1983. And it had a list of mayors, except it had these gaps in it. And then a few years ago, I found a file at the library that listed 3 other mayors that we did not know about.
Wow.
Their pictures are not at City Hall. City Hall has pictures of the mayors all around city council chambers. But these 3 guys were not pictured there. So I led a charge to find their pictures and put them up, and I had a lot of help. The current mayor, Joe Along, was a big help with this. He pushed for this a lot. Joby Topper, the Lock Haven University librarian, did a lot of research, and we wound up finding a couple of them.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Well, Joby also discovered another guy, Winfield Claywater, who we were not aware had been the mayor.
Wow.
He was mayor in 1901 for about a year and change, and we never heard of this guy. Turns out he resigned as mayor because his daughter died. Yeah, she was like
as good a reason as any. That's as good a reason as any.
Yeah, I mean, you can't blame the guy.
No, not at all.
As a matter of fact, based on what happened around this death, I would have to say Winfield Claywater was a great man. He resigned as mayor because he was grieving for his daughter, and in fact left Lock Haven. He never lived here again. In fact, he's buried up in New York State.
Wow.
But in September of 1901, the president was assassinated, and they took it a lot more seriously in those days than we would now. These days, everybody would just like and share and be done with it. But you remember back in the Kennedy days, for instance, they closed businesses, everybody drew the drapes, and So knowing that his town needed a way to grieve, Claywater called a meeting at the courthouse for support. He invited everyone to come to the courthouse and talk about their feelings with the dead president and how they felt and support each other. This was 4 days after the death of his child.
Wow.
So here's Claywater reaching out to support his city at a time when he really needed it most, you
Yeah.
know? I have to say that is a great, unselfish guy,
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
you know, and we didn't know about him until just recently. So
Yeah.
honestly, if you ask me how many mayors we've had, I'm not going to commit because there still could be 3 or 4 more there that we are not
Right,
aware of.
yeah. Flip a coin, who knows? Oh. Now, let's get into the paranormal stuff a little bit.
Okay.
I know, I want to say I've seen Black Forest Inn on your list of sites around town that would be considered a hotspot for paranormal activity.
Black Forest Inn. That might not have been my list. Though I
No.
will say, well, you know what you might have seen was me talking about the Black Forest itself.
Maybe.
Here you go, little man.
Scoopy
Hey, take the remote control back in. You're going to need it. Might have been talking about the Black Forest itself.
Okay.
The Black Forest is an area up to the north part of Clinton, the southern part of Potter.
Okay.
And I will say, if all the stories are correct, excuse me just a moment, I got to go break up the dogs.
No,
Yep.
you're fine.
Rosie,
This is pretty good, guys.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
okay, sorry about that.
No,
We've
no
got
worries.
one
You're fine.
very young dog and one very old dog.
I
And that was the
can
young
relate.
one.
Can relate.
And the little one wants to play, and the old one is having none of it. So I spent half the day breaking them up. So, at any rate, a man named Robert Lyman did a couple of really good books on hauntings and weird stuff in the Black Forest. And I'll tell you, I mean, if his stories are to be believed, we live on the southern end of one very weird area. There are stories of vanishing hikers and phantom panthers and skulls with horns being discovered and just, I mean, all sorts of really cool, amazing stuff.
Mhm. Huh.
You know,
Yeah.
if I had to pick one specific spot in Lock Haven that was like the most haunted, I would say probably the old jail. We've
Yeah.
already talked about it. I mean, a lot of the time jails wind up being haunted, you know, by their very nature. A lot of people who are not very nice live there and die there.
Yeah.
And, you know, that jail is actually the site of the only legal hanging in Clinton County. In all of Clinton County, only one guy's ever been hung for his crime, Luther Schaefer, who was hung for murdering a family in Sugar Valley in 1888. He's buried up in St. Mary's Cemetery,
Okay.
just like right on the outskirts of town.
Mhm.
You know, we believe Schaefer to be haunting the place. We've investigated the jail a few times. You know, we think he and some other people might still be lurking around in there.
Interesting.
You know, so yeah, there's I wrote an article a few years ago about Clinton County's most haunted stretch of road.
Okay.
I would have to say that as the Pine Loganton Road.
Yeah. Okay.
Runs from McElhatton down to Loganton.
Mhm.
And I mean, there's a lot of stories there. You know, stories of like hauntings in cemeteries that lie along it. An old story of a man who lived there and was kind of haunted by the ghost of his lost love.
Yeah.
Bigfoot's been sighted down along there.
Nice.
You know, yeah, I mean, Bigfoot's everywhere, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's an attention hog, but you know,
I'm gonna have
but,
to take a drive up there one day.
you know, it's worth it. I mean, even if you don't see anything paranormal, it's a really nice drive.
Yeah.
It's,
We've
you
got a
know,
lot of beautiful
really neat
countryside
place.
around here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Sure.
oh yeah. You know, so it's worth it regardless. You know,
Mhm.
but I would have to rate that as the most haunted stretch of road in Clinton County.
It makes a lot of sense. Like Craig and Matt, you guys probably you wouldn't know, but I've driven down that road a few times. But it makes a lot of sense for that to be just because
Yeah, well,
how
it's
wooded it
very
is and how
remote.
curvy it is.
Yeah. I mean, you're not really going through any towns,
No.
Your car breaks down, you're looking at a pretty good hike to get to anywhere worth being,
Yeah.
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 And now, did
Mackleton
something
on one
happen there,
end,
Lou?
Loganton on the other, and that's it.
Yeah.
Was there something significant that happened in that area, Lou?
Not that I know of. It's just a collection of stories. I read a lot of the old folklore and the old legends, and I just noticed that a lot of them, take place along that stretch of road. If we're looking at some reason, I would have to say it's more the documentation than anything else. Henry Shoemaker, one of my big heroes, wrote down a lot of old legends, and he lived in Macklehattan.
Okay.
He was near the end of the Pine Loganton Road, so he heard a lot of stories from down there. A man named Homer Rosenberger wrote a whole book about local legends, and he, as a matter of fact, visited Macklehattan, the same area. Matter of fact, Rosenberger's book contains a little informal map of the Pine Loganton Road and shows where all this stuff was supposed to have happened.
Wow.
And he's got these little stars and arrows showing where everything was taking place. So it's not like there's 13 people were killed along there or anything like that.
Right.
It's just the guys who lived near there were really good about writing down these stories.
Well, luckily for us, for sure, because that's something
Oh yeah,
to check out.
yeah, I'd say so.
That's definitely something to check out. Yeah, I haven't been up that way
Yeah,
in a minute.
it's funny how like one person has an experience and then that just becomes legend once it's written down,
Right.
Yeah,
You never know.
yeah,
You never know who's gonna see it.
Yeah. And you never
One of
know
the
who's gonna
things-
say like I had the weird experience too.
One of the things I like to do is read these old legends and try to figure out like where they happened, what was going on. And a lot of the time, with Shoemaker's stories, for instance, he would write these things and he wouldn't exactly give you directions, but he'd leave enough clues that you can figure it out.
Right. Okay.
That's actually another one that my son and my wife and I went on not long ago. He wrote a story about a young girl who moved from Germany and brought a sack full of fairies with her from the German forests. And then, released these fairies, and they say to this day, they dance around her grave. Now, it turns out I was able to figure out which cemetery and which grave he was talking about based on clues in the story.
Interesting.
Oh, yeah, it's up in Swissdale Cemetery.
Oh, I know exactly where that is.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah.
I'll have to
And
do some digging.
interestingly, we went up a while ago, last summer, and we were looking around, and there were these giant, bugs, these moth type of things. And I could see how in the dark, people walking by might look at that and think fairies around that grave.
Yeah.
So sometimes you dig into it and you find something like that,
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. It's definitely an interesting view of the world.
Yeah.
And because a lot of people just ignore that kind of stuff. But I'm not
Yeah,
one of
I
them.
grew up on Indiana Jones.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like us.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Very
the thing. These adventures
explorative.
are all out there. They're just
Yeah.
waiting to be found.
Yeah.
There's so much out there to discover.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure. And being here most of my life, it's just fun knowing stuff I didn't know about the area, because I do enjoy this area because it's, for being what it is, it's quiet enough that I can enjoy it. It's not a big bustling city, and it's just it's a city, but it's not 2 million people.
Yeah.
shoulder to
Right, it's
shoulder.
not downtown Manhattan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a way more relaxed environment, and of course people are going to grump and moan about it, but it's your hometown. If you don't grump and moan about your hometown, you're not doing it right.
Exactly.
I hear a lot of complaints about Lock Haven. There's nothing here. I honestly think that says more about the person saying it than it does about the community.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. My only complaint is that we don't have a Taco Bell.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah, maybe one day.
please.
I think
It's just-
what I find weird about it, Lou, is there is no building where I live as old as that house you were talking about that was built back then, and it's still there
yes.
today. And
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've
There
got a
isn't-
few from somebody from California said that to me once too, that they don't have anything there that go back that far. Yeah, we've got buildings that go back as far as the 1830s within the city limits. The
Jeez.
oldest building in the county is out at the corner of the River Road and Harley Drive, and that one goes back to the 1760s.
Whoa.
I drive by that house every day.
You know the one.
I live in Woolrich. I know. Yes.
Oh, so you do know? Yeah.
Yeah. I
That's
drive
right
that
on the
road
way,
all the
yeah.
time. I pass
Right
that
on
house.
the corner there at Harley Drive. That is the oldest building in the county.
Okay. I'm gonna snag a picture of it for sure.
Yes,
Oh
please.
yeah.
Oh, I'm going to. Once we're done here, I'm driving down to the end of the road.
We didn't have any regular settlers in my province
Mm.
until the early 20th century. Like we
Oh,
weren't
really?
incorporated as a
Wow.
province until 1905.
Yeah. Yeah,
Wow,
right
that's
here on our
interesting.
property. We
I mean,
have
we do have some cool history. It's just newer.
yeah.
Well, yeah. You have fresher history.
Yeah, right here on the property, we have our town's original schoolhouse. It's like about 300 years old, but it was enough for the entire town. Like, what? It's a two-sided classroom. Yeah,
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
On your property?
yeah, it's like literally right there.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
That's cool.
yeah,
That is really cool.
And the other thing I'd seen that you talked about, Lou, was the Calder PA bricks. I thought that was
Yes.
so cool.
I discovered that kind of by accident. I wrote about that twice, actually. I was so excited about that. My son and I go out walking a lot, and right down, within sight of our front yard, there is this just like half a block's worth of brick sidewalk. And we went down, well, City Councilman Bill Mincer asked me about it one time. And I went and I looked, and the bricks were stamped. It said Calder, PA block. And it turned out, when I dug into it, that, Calder was a town that never actually existed. That was over in Cameron County. The guy who owned the brick factory wanted to found a town. His name was Calder. And he wanted to found a town called Calder. Except he couldn't get the permission to start the post office, and the whole thing fell through. And by the time that happened, he already had several thousand bricks with Calder, PA stamped on it. So they got sold off at a deep discount. Actually, since writing that, I've heard from a couple of other people who say, oh yeah, there's some of those bricks on this here sidewalk in Cameron County, or the airport has like fill underground that was mostly those bricks. But yeah, right, and I love this. Right down the road from my house, within sight of my front yard, is this neat thing that came from another county. That's this,
yeah.
fascinating little mystery waiting to be found.
It just feels so classical. Like I've not been there, but I've read some Italian history, and if you go through some of old Rome, you'll find some of those old stones that they did the laws they put in, or the names of the emperors, and they're just plugging holes at the bottom of a staircase or something.
Yeah.
And that story you wrote just sounded so much like that. Where you're just stumbling around and you see Caesar Augustus on a toilet brick or something like that.
There's still a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah.
I've seen places where there's gravestones that were used to build a wall of, local building or something.
Whoa.
There's probably half the buildings in the hill section actually have gravestones as part of their basement foundations.
Wow.
Wow.
That explains a lot.
Right, yeah. Roughly between South Highland Street and where the Sunoco station now stands, along Bellefonte Avenue was once a cemetery, Great Island Cemetery, that in 1919 was dug up and moved. Except it was really it was a sloppy move. It's really more accurate to say they moved the top half.
Yeah.
To this day, people
Poltergeist
still
style.
find interesting things up there. And I
Sure.
know some of the stones were used to build some of the houses that later, occupied the land.
Wow.
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 I don't know that I could live in a house like that.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
You get kind of used to it. I'm not on top of that property, but my place is haunted too. So you do, you
That's pretty
adjust, you
cool.
get used to it.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, I suppose. Man.
I've never had to try it, so I'll just take your word for it.
You get used to it quick.
Yeah,
it's
it
funny.
depends on the maliciousness.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a teenage girl in the house. She, Ida Yost. She committed suicide in the summer of 1905
Mm.
On what is now my back porch.
Wow.
And and we've lived here. It's coming up on 18 years. And I mean, at first, we'd hear footsteps at night in the hallway on the stairs. At first, I'd I'd get out of bed and I'd go and check to make sure everything's locked and all. And now, you know how you live near the airport and you sleep through the planes after a while?
Yeah.
Same thing.
Okay.
Same thing. We're pretty much used to it. A lot of the time, I even forget until something makes me think of it. My son blames stuff on her. Dad, Ida just spilled Kool-Aid all over the floor.
Oh,
Um,
I don't know what happened. I was just
Well played.
yeah, she's his scapegoat, but-
I
Well,
like
Lou.
that, actually.
Go ahead. Oh, you were just.
No, it was Ida.
Yeah. Well, Lou, this has been very informative, very
yeah,
fun.
this has been a lot of fun.
glad I could do this, guys.
Yeah.
We
glad you could
really
too.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it.
We're saying goodbye, buddy.
It's nice to meet you, bud.
Bye.
Nice to meet you.
Hey, thanks so much, you guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Thank
sir.
you.
We really appreciate it.
That was
Anytime.
awesome.
I'll
Bye.
definitely
Take
get a hold of
care.
you down
Bye.
the road.
All right. Yeah, anytime.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Awesome.
All right. Logging off.
Yeah, there he goes.
Good. Nope, there we go. All right. That was a lot of fun, boys.
That was a good one.
And we will meet back up tomorrow night when we talk to 13.
Absolutely. All right.
Cheers, boys.
Yeah.